All right, so let me just tell you what it is up front, and then I'm going to take some steps back and then kind of step back in time a bit, and then bring you back up to speed, back up to the present. So church multiplication networks, it's a new, for us in the IBC, it's a new strategy, a new approach, it's a new venue, a new tool, a lot of words that could describe it. So what is a CMN? They exist, this network exists to encourage, to resource, to help, to support, equip, and even challenge our churches to plant churches that will in turn plant church planting churches. I worked real hard to get the church planting in as many times as I could in one single sentence. So this network is there that we can come together, people, churches, leaders, to encourage one another, resource one another, facilitate, support, equip, challenge, all for the sole purpose of seeing our churches, our individual churches, plant churches that hopefully will plant churches. Who is it for? CMNs. Who can be a part of this? They're for parent church leaders. They're for potential parent church leaders. They're for church planners, church plant team members. They're for anybody and everybody that has any desire whatsoever to learn more about or to be a part of or take a role in seeing churches multiplied and more disciple-making churches being planted. So that should be, that's all encompassing. That should be absolutely everybody, unless you just, you hate the idea of church planting. And even that person, I would invite them in. So this is what it's for. It's to bring us together for all these variety of reasons, aspects to end up helping the church, the local church, plant churches. All right, so now let me take a couple steps back. I won't belabor this because most of you are familiar with this content. I'm not going to go over the IBC's mission, vision, and core values in its entirety, but I do have some excerpts that I want to pull out and just mention because they're so relevant to what we're doing now with bringing the church multiplication networks on board. So when it comes to the IBC mission, we exist as an IBC family. We exist to mobilize and multiply disciple-making churches. So that's what we want to see all of our churches be. So this one excerpt, it is our deep desire that we join our missionary God in what he's already doing in the world. So that's a real key. What God is already doing, we want to see it, recognize it, and accept his invitation into it and join what he's doing. And we want to do it together with others. All right, so hang on to that in particular, that we want to be a part of what God is already doing. When it comes to the IBC vision of how we're going to carry this out or accomplish this mission, the IBC vision is this: we envision a movement of global-minded churches that are reproducing healthy disciples, reproducing leaders, and reproducing churches or congregations. So again, not to cover all of our vision, but I just wanted to highlight a few things. This church multiplication network is so it will help us, our churches, keep their focus on making and multiplying disciples. The CMN is going to help us develop pastors and develop leaders with needed skills and knowledge. The CMN is going to help us be more of a catalyst as a whole, the IBC, individual churches and people, be a catalyst for seeing strategic church planting happen. And then by doing it in a network, it's also going to further foster our fellowship, our connections, and our partnership among pastors and leaders in our churches. And then finally, our core values. Our core values define us and as an international family of churches. And our core values, and these are just three that I'm showing here, but there are 6 or 7 of them. These core values, they drive our decisions and they drive our ministries. All right. So it's because of these core values, in a large extent, it's because of the core values that we have that brings us to implementing the church multiplication network. So one of our values is partnership. And we believe that we're better together. We believe that every single church, regardless of size or financial situation or geographical location or how young or how old, every single church has something to offer. And we want to bring in every single church that we have into our church multiplication networks. We also value healthy churches, of course, and we believe that the local church is God's primary means for presenting the gospel and establishing his kingdom. All right, and this is huge too, in respect to what we're talking about today, because it is the local church. It is the local church. This was a revelation to me. I think it was about 2 years ago, as our church multiplication leadership team was together. And if you've known me very long, you know that I love the IBC. I'm a product of the IBC, and I'm just passionate about, the expat community and the IBC family. But as much as I love the IBC, it's not the convention as a whole that God has built. It's the local church that God builds. It's the local church that the gates of hell will not prevail against, So it's the local church. So that was a huge revelation to me. And so with this church multiplication network, what it does is it points our efforts all back to the local church. All of our help, all of our support, everything goes to the local church. And then finally, church planting. Of course, we value church planting, and we believe that every church should be involved in some way. Every church should be involved in some way. So when it comes to, let's say, a spectrum of where a particular church might be in relationship to birthing a new church, well, everybody's going to be at a different place. And some might not be able to see them doing that for a long time. Or maybe they don't even see themselves doing it ever. I would hope that would change. But some see themselves ready and postured and have a vision from God to do it right now, or they're already doing it. So wherever they might be on that spectrum, we believe that they can be involved. We believe they should be involved as the church family or the convention as a whole. So there's just a few real quick words about our mission, vision, and core value. And I just wanted to bring that to the front of this conversation to show how that is leading us to this particular strategy. Okay, so about 10 years ago or so, we got onto a great strategy that hinged around a format called a lead team, and it did so much for us. And again, real quick, basically, I can't describe all that a lead team is, but a lead team, we would take a leader or two from a handful of churches, bring them together, and we work together to add a new church. We'd recruit a planter. We would determine a good location, a city, bring the two together, do some facilitating, and a new church would start. All right. Prior to starting with the lead team concept and using this in the IBC, we hadn't done any real intentional church planting for decades, really. So this helped get church planting back on the radar of the IBC. So you can see on the slide there, in 2012, 3 churches, one in Darmstadt, Germany, one in Panama City, one in Tamarindo, Costa Rica. All 3 of those churches were launched or started with some degree of help or facilitation from the lead team. Also in 2015, Rome International was started through the facilitation and the efforts of a lead team. Then something very unusual or cool happened there in Aalborg, Denmark, where there was an English language international, a group of people in a Danish church, and they launched out of that Danish church on their own to become a church. So that's one of the IBC churches there. In 2016, something very interesting happened with from Frontline Community Church. They birthed a new church called Waypoint in Kaiserslautern, Germany. All right, then also in 2018, Glace Community Church was started through the lead team efforts. Then also you see the last 3 churches that have started or been started. IBC Bonn was birthed or planted by IBC Cologne. EIC Turns in Paris was planted by EIC Ruel Paris. A new work in London was started called Multination London, and it was started by Multination Frankfurt. Okay, so I go back to that part of our vision in the IBC that we want to join in with what we see God doing. And what you don't see on this list of churches being planted is that there's another half dozen or more in the works, and they're all being started out of our churches. And so what we see and recognize is that the lead team concept served us extremely well for a season. Maybe we wouldn't be where we are today if it hadn't been for that lead team concept and that approach and that strategy and how God blessed that. But now we see God moving in our churches. Our individual churches are stepping up and saying, well, you know, why don't we plant a church? Why don't we start a church? And I won't take time today, but I could give you hours of reasons why a mother church approach is ideal. So we see God moving our convention. We see God moving our church, in our churches and through our churches, to move us from the church, adding new churches with the lead team concept, to bringing it back to our local churches and facilitating, encouraging, and supporting our local churches to plant new churches. Which brings us to this concept, this new strategy, if you will, of church multiplication networks. So you saw in this old diagram, this diagram here, how it showed kind of how we bring a leader or two together, we'd form a team, and we would start or we'd add one new church. So here's how I envision this looking different with church multiplication networks. Here we have, again, a variety of people coming together in a network. Maybe it's a little less formal, a little less official as a lead team was. And here we've got the potential, instead of just a group of leaders focusing on starting one new church or adding a new church, we have several churches with the potential to reproduce themselves and birth a new church, which in hopes would birth a new church. And this can all be going on simultaneously. So with this concept, I see the potential of moving from addition to reproduction. And eventually, when we get into second, third, and fourth generation churches, then we'll get into the really exciting thing of multiplication. Also, what I try to demonstrate here, illustrate with a couple of these arrows is, okay, here sits a church. Prime example, let's just say, well, from in Europe right now, there's Aalborg Church in Denmark. And they're a very young church, a very small church, and they have a real big heart for church planting and church multiplication, but they just don't see themselves. They don't see that they have a vision from God to plant a church or birth a church themselves just yet. But they have all this zeal to be a part of church planting. So here in a church multiplication network forum, they can partner up with another church and be a part of birthing new churches or planting new churches. So we see a lot of opportunity for informal, if you will, partnerships between churches, between people and leaders in churches and other churches to play together, to work together, and partner in a variety of ways to see new churches get started. And you never know, what a leader or a group from one church that's not ready to plant a church, they may just bring to an effort to another church just what that other church needs to start or to plant a new church. Whether that's some finance, whether that's some skills, some talents, some information, some just people resource. It could go on and on. So lots of opportunity for partnership and collaboration there. So I'm going to pause just for a few minutes. I want to keep us on track with our time, but I'm going to pause just for a few moments. And since we're a little bit smaller group, and hey, Dave, welcome. Any quick, let's take about maybe 5 minutes here. Any quick comment, question, or thought of what I've shared so far?
I just have one question, Daryl, or maybe more than one. Is you don't have to spend too much time. I know that recently I've been hearing a little bit more about replants, and I guess Bethel Multi-Nation was really kind of a replant, right, from Bethel. I mean, they already had sort of their core, and then they relocated and replanted. The home church I pastored in Houston, Texas, went from being White Oak Baptist Church, New Day Church. I'm just wondering, philosophically and all, what your thinking is on that, and are we thinking about, do we have any replants going on, and all? So I just kind of
I'm not aware, and if somebody else is aware of a replant type thing, then please shout out. But I will tell you this again. A few years back, I was very linear in my thinking. I was very black and white in my thinking. We do English language expat. That's, if it doesn't fit that little frame, then I'm not interested in it. I used to think if this isn't coming out of a lead team, I'm not interested in it. I'm just confessing to you guys. Okay, that's and you're like, we already knew that about you, But now I'm like, where I used to would have started, I would have answered with no first, and you try to convince me otherwise. Now I start with yes, why not? God's big, God's infinite. There's all sorts of ways. So all that, Paul, to say, yes, a replant if there's an opportunity there. We've got IBC churches planting indigenous language churches, Spanish-speaking churches in Spain. Weird stuff like a Brazilian Portuguese-speaking group in Berlin, Germany. So now I'm saying with this church multiplication network and being, I'll say more open to a variety of approaches. Who's to say every church plant has to look like the traditional, let's find a professional clergy and find a building and all that expense, let's make room for other expressions of God, God's church, call it what you want, cell group, movement, house church, whatever. So in all of that, hear me saying, we're just wide open, man, to whatever God has there. Sorry, that was kind of long. What other kind of questions or comments any of you have?
I may be the only one with questions, and you might be getting to this. Guatemala, yeah, see that. So how is this, you might be about to answer this, how is this going to kind of change the idea of feasibility studies and some of the ways we've kind of been functioning? Yeah. Though I would say we have been a little more organic than what, like you said, as I've been associated with it, we've had one linear, I think, life, and one more organic, Tamarindo. And so anyway, you might be getting this. I'm just interested in how that might be changing with feasibility studies and all.
Yeah, feasibility studies are one of the greatest things we learned. Again, I want to give credit and appreciation to Converge. This is a group of churches in the United States that we learned from, and Dan Maxon has been a part of them for years. And Dan was in the roots of lead team, which honestly kind of made me a little nervous talking about leaving the lead team concept, and he's online. I'm like, Dan's kind of my hero with that, and so I'm like, but there's so many other pieces. Paul, you talk about feasibility studies. That is a definite tool that we've been successful with, and it's served us well, and we're going to keep using it. And it's an outstanding opportunity for the kind of collaborative partnership between our churches. Like, let me just throw this out there. So let's just say Nate Corpy's thinking about planting another 10 churches in Panama City, right? Big vision, maybe not 10. But anyway, so maybe they want to do a feasibility study. He invites some of you guys, other people from other churches, to come and be a part of this feasibility study to work together. All right. So yeah, I'm going to continue to suggest feasibility studies.
Especially because like this, I add to this, Daryl, because like this group, especially you guys, have experience in that feasibility study as well. Whereas like if LifeBridge were to do a feasibility study, I mean, maybe I can think of only one person I know in LifeBridge that has done a feasibility study, and feasibility studies are really good for individual churches to do because it gets people passionate about that and seeing the need, but also to bring in some of the experts.
Yeah, exactly. And with regard to partnership opportunities, I mentioned earlier, here's a church, doesn't really feel like they can plant a church themselves yet, but really want to be a part of church planting. So they look to help. Or maybe there's a church that says, we can't do this on our own, but we would love to have another church or 2 or 3 come alongside and somehow be a collaborative effort. Wonderful. Or another scenario is there's a church sitting there, has all the resources it needs, has all the experience it needs. It really doesn't, that church doesn't see that it needs anything from anyone else to plant a new church. I would say to that church, that's wonderful, but invite some others in anyway, not for your own benefit per se, but for their benefit, so that they can rub shoulders with people who are actually doing church planting, so they can rub shoulders with a parent, a soon-to-be parent church, and just kind of get that all over them, so they go back to their church and it inspires them to do the same. So it's not just about, well, if I need somebody, I'll call you. I'm encouraging, no, I'm like, don't do anything by yourself, right? I mean, that's a primary leadership principle right there. Don't do it by yourself. Bring somebody else in, because there's so many benefits from that. Let me just take you back. Welcome. I see another face or two showing up. Welcome. Let me share my screen with you guys, and once again.
And as you guys have questions, you can just type them in the chat too, so that like we can go back to them and you don't forget. If you're like me, you forget the question, and it might be good to revisit, especially with the whole group.
Absolutely. And if you have a question, just pops in your head and you just don't think, well, it doesn't fit right now, throw that in the chat as well, because I'll actually have a recording of the chat text as well. So if you have a question in there and we don't address it, then Nate or myself will get back with you personally on that later on. So just again, real quick, because we got a couple of new people that joined the call. Here is what we're talking about: church multiplication networks, new thing, just starting in the IBC. It's different than what we were doing before, called lead teams, but some elements are still the same. And it's going to be a forum where we come together, somewhat unofficially, somewhat informally, but we're going to share with each other. We're going to talk about what's going on in our respective churches as far as multiplication, so that we can look for partnership opportunities or collaborative opportunities. And it's all about encouraging. Everything we do in a church multiplication network is for the purpose of encouraging, equipping, facilitating the local church to reproduce itself. And I talk church planting and church reproduction, but as we work together in CMNs, you're going to see that I also believe it has to start with disciple reproduction, and it has to have the element of leader reproduction. Those are all necessary elements, I believe, before you even get to church reproduction. So here we got just all this diagram showing new churches being planted, and lots of different opportunities for partnering in a variety of ways. I'd like to take a moment here and just hear from some of you. I didn't really prep anybody except maybe Nate. I'd like to hear from your own church context. What's going on now? What sort of a multiplication efforts are going on right now? And you can be anywhere on the spectrum. You can say, well, the conversation has come up. It was an agenda item on an elder meeting or a church council meeting one time. Wherever you may be, that's fine. I'd love to hear it. Or you got a real heart for a particular area of your city or the next city over. So let's take a few minutes and hear some real time. What's going on now. Nate, why don't you start? Why don't you share a little bit about some of the vision there in Panama City?
Yeah, so we've been talking about church multiplication since I began here, just because we see the need, and two, local churches grow people and they grow communities, and because of how the city is set, it can easily, more people are likely to go to church if a church is in their neighborhood rather than going across town. So we've been talking about it ever since we got here. But more specifically, 2 steps towards that. This past year, our leadership team met, and we are, not only have we been taking steps to think about that, but we have been putting money behind that. So every when offering comes in, there's a line item that we are putting money aside to eventually go to that. I have personally identified 2 different areas in the city that I believe could be very successful. And so this year, as a leadership team, we put one of our goals is to do a feasibility study this year. So that was one of our goals to do that. Also, as far as hiring another person for whether that's in the new church or however that's going to work with strategy, we're writing job descriptions and things like that, thinking for that in the future. So that's kind of just how things are right now. Now, obviously, with this pandemic, it's kind of put a little ripple in our plans. But actually, I don't know if it's a ripple. I think for me, it's like a landing strip right now, because I know, I can go into that another time. But yes, so that's kind of where LifeBridge is at right now.
Cool. Let me just interject this real quick too, and then we'll hear from some others about what's going on in your church. So here's a prime example of how the CMN will work for us. If we're not gathered together doing this, then none of us on the screen right here, none of us know about this vision and this desire and what LifeBridge is wanting to do. We don't know that they're planning to do a feasibility study, but now we're aware of it. All right. So now, because of the awareness we have opportunity for partnership, and we can talk to Nate, and Nate can talk to us about, hey, y'all want to be a part of this. And so just, in my opinion, I'm looking around the screen here and I'm thinking, well, this feasibility study needs to either have Paul or Dan or Nathaniel, because they've done feasibility studies before and Nate has not. So some expertise there. Then I'm thinking, I don't know if Chris has ever, I don't even know if he knows what we're talking about, feasibility study. I know Samuel's, excited about anything that has to do with church planning. So he needs to be a part of that. Chris needs to be a part of that. Then Nate needs to make sure that he involves some people in his church so that we get this beyond just the pastor level and into the church body. And oh, by the way, some of you that might be participating in it need to bring along some people from your church, with those kind of voices that speak out to the greater population. Some of you know about 5 voices. So you need to get some of those guardians in there. You need to get some of those nurturers in there. and bring them along and be a part of this team. So you just see how the wonderful opportunity there is for this partnership. And then we're just talking about feasibility study, and there's lots and lots and lots of other opportunities as well. Somebody else share what's going on in your local church in the way of church multiplication.
I would like to share about my experience or the things that I have seen in the last years where we were working in Lima, in Peru. The way we do things are kind of different the way you are sharing this morning, especially because usually we don't do like feasibility studies. That's something that I really appreciate the way LifeBridge and IBC work here in Panama. The way we do is like we usually, for starting a new church, we started with small groups in houses. So once we have like 5 or 6 study Bibles in houses in a neighborhood, that is the way we put all those groups together, and then we start a church in a neighborhood. So that's a way. From my experience, I've seen growing the church I used to attend from 1 to 5 small churches in 5 years. That's one church per year. But this is a different way because maybe in Peru or in Lima works better, people gathering in houses every Saturday night or every any other weekday at night, and then after 1 year they believe that they are ready to start a new church in that area.
Yeah, that's good. Thanks, Samuel. Again, I say lots and lots and lots of different ways. You know, I won't take the time to do it now, but you know, I showed you that slide, and the last 3 churches in the IBC that were started, all 3 of them were started differently. All 3 of them were started differently, different strategy. Some was more of a small group family thing. Some of it was as a campus. Some of it started as a prayer group. One brought in a new pastor or planter. One, the current pastor, you know, doubled up and he pastored both his church and the church plant. So all that to say, there's lots and lots of different ways. And so we're moving to a more open, keep our eyes wide open, see how God is moving. If we've never done it that way before, fine. Fine. Let's just follow the Spirit's leading in that, and whatever, however he's doing it, whatever he's doing, let's follow him. Well, let me show you a couple more slides real quick. I'll try not to talk too much, but just want to run you through them, things to come. And then maybe we'll have a few more minutes at the very end for some last comments and questions. By the way, it's my intention that every time we come together in this network, and I should have mentioned this earlier, Nate and I together will be leading this network in Latin America. Every time we come together, we want to have this time of sharing what's going on now in our churches. All right, so we want to always keep real world, real time, what's going on, you know, to hear what you're doing so that we can pray together about it, encourage you and your church towards it, and see if there's, you know, what opportunities lie for partnership in the gospel in that respect. Our venues will be monthly online like we're doing now, but not limited to that. We'll also look at opportunities where we can get together to, you know, in the flesh, so to speak, face to face in a location for some extended times. So maybe it's reminiscent, or it'll look similar to, you know, you used to have lead team meetings online, and then also you'd have a gathering, lead team gathering for a day or 2 or 3 days in a location. So we'll have a church multiplication network gathering on location somewhere. So it's not just online. but it's also going to be face-to-face. So a variety of ways we'll do that. All right, when it comes to our meetings, though, online in particular, well, all of our gatherings, we really want them to be value added for you. And we're going to need your help. We're going to need to hear from you, get your feedback, get your ideas and suggestions. But, my desire is that these CMN meetings or gatherings, like the one we're having right now, that you'll get the date and the time, and we'll get that time right. The time zones won't mess me up. We'll get that, and you'll put that on your calendar, and you'll make it a priority, and you'll look forward to it, because you'll know that we're going to come together. You're going to be encouraged. You're going to learn something. You're going to hear something. You're going to find something applicable that you can use. All right, so we want to really make them value added, and we'll need your help to do that. Here's what we got coming up. Next month in May, we're going to jump into the deep end of the pool, and we're going to talk about disciple making. Do we make disciples in order to plant churches? Or do we plant churches in order to make disciples? Or is it both, or is there a mixture there? Or is there a variety of approaches to that? So we're going to jump in the deep end of the pool and discuss those kind of questions. Also, what does a church plant look like? What does a church plant look like? Does it start with finding a building and finding a professional church planter, or does it look like what Samuel was talking about in smaller groups that evolve and grow? Or can it look a lot of different ways? So we want to really get into that and talk about that in May. In June, we want to talk about partnership and how we're better together. Today, we've talked quite a bit about feasibility studies, so we can touch on that a little bit more as necessary. But we'll also talk about other opportunities like assessment centers, where we come together, we partner with each other to help assess potential church planters, whether that's a planter coming in from somewhere else or growing up out of your own church. We'll talk about partnering in training events. We'll talk about partnering in residency programs that are going on in the IBC and much more. So we'll be looking at how partnering together will help us advance the gospel and our mission of planting disciple-making churches. So that'll be in June. And then in July, we've decided on a leadership content. And it's especially here in the leadership and people development subject matter that we really want to be able to give each other tools that that may be simple to understand, simple to turn around and train someone else on how to do it. But it's the payback, the potential for impact is great. So we really want to use our time in such a way that we learn things that we can walk away and use right then and there in our own church to even increase the health of our own church right now. All right, so we identified, our church multiplication leadership team identified, it's always, when we're talking with you guys, it's always the need is leadership in some form or fashion. It's your growing leadership, it's developing other leaders, it's recruiting leaders, it's empowering leaders. So that's a huge topic that we'll be hitting, on a regular basis, but also disciple making, because that's the tip of the spear, disciple making and church planting for sure. All right, so just wanted to give you a sneak preview. So once again, that's next month. It's going to be this disciple making church planting content we'll be talking about. Then in June, partnership opportunities. And then in July, it'll be a leadership content. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And we're doing well on time. And again, I'd like to hear if you have any questions or comments. And then we'll spend some time praying for one another, and we'll close up our gathering today.
Daryl, Paul had a question, but go ahead, Nathaniel. After Nathaniel, we can answer Paul's question.
Okay.
All right. My question is pretty basic. I just want to make sure I understand the concept. So at first, when you started talking about these monthly meetings, they sounded a lot like lead team meetings. But what I hear you saying, the difference is that these meetings would be more outside content driven, and interacting about that content, that value added, than the LEAD format from previously. Is that an accurate way to see the difference?
Yeah, I think so. Nathaniel, if I understand you, you guys remember that, well, some of you may remember that the LEAD, lead team, is an acronym, and each of those letters stand for something. So L is learning. Well, yeah, we're still going to do some learning. E is encouraging. We're going to encourage one another. A is action or achieving. And then the D is dreaming. And so we'll do some dreaming together, and there may be some action points, but the big difference is the team's not coming together to work on a project, a single project to plant a new church. It's content driven. I think, Nathaniel, is what you're talking about. And the different contents coming in, a variety of things to help you all go out back in your own, lead your own church in church multiplication and reproduction. Someone else had a question, or?
Paul had one.
I put you on the chat.
Mm-hmm. Okay. We're okay. So yeah. So Paul's asking the question. So just to be clear, we're disbanding lead teams, replacing them with the multiplication networks. Do we have dates for the meetings? Yes. So yes, there will not be lead teams anymore. We'll have church multiplication networks. I guess you could say we're replacing them in that respect. With that, another big difference, besides, that the team's not planting a church, but churches are planting churches. Another big difference is it's not a formal, official organization like the lead team was. Lead team had, it had an account, it had a budget. So that won't exist anymore either. What you guys do informally as a network, that's totally up to you, as far as, sharing financial resources, for particular things. But yes, the lead teams will be no more. We'll be operating church multiplication networks. We're hoping that our church multiplication networks will also multiply. All right. So we could end up with 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 in Europe, and another 1 or 2 or however many in Latin America.
Have we informed everybody on the lead team about this? Was everybody invited to this one? Because we have kind of a diverse lead team right now.
Yeah. So emails, I probably sent out 15 emails that you guys all kind of saw to different people. There was people that told me they were going to be here that aren't here. So I wasn't going to tell them like, hey, we are changing lead teams. I didn't want to tell them that before we had this meeting. So just so that you guys, because that's the point of this.
Yeah, that's the point of this. But Paul, you bring to mind something I think Nate and I will talk about and do, and that is we'll do a follow-up and just put it in writing and make it more, make it clear as well, especially for those that missed this. But all of you here, plus those that weren't able to make it, will get a follow-up email explaining the nuts and bolts of that. And any of you previous lead team members, if you want to have some in-depth conversation with me about more the how or the why in particular, we can talk about that. And two,
the thing is, it's not exclusive to IBC churches.
Right.
And that's the big thing that we saw, especially here in Latin America, that we had, Chris Henderson in Honduras, Mark in Rio, we had Mark in Bolivia, and Werner, these guys that aren't necessarily IBC pastors, but we're interested in what the IBC is doing and how they're doing it. And so we want to bring them into this conversation. And the point is not so like, hey, you have to sign on this dotted line that you're an IBC church. No. Like we're not IBC minded. We're kingdom minded. And that idea of like, we want to advance God's kingdom, not the kingdom of IBC, which would be great if IBC grew, but like really God's kingdom's first.
So I just want to get my acrostics correct. FICLA became lead team, and now lead team is what are we now?
CMN. A CMN. Yeah, and really, Paul, I just
Church Multiplication Network. Okay.
CMN, Church Multiplication. I'd rather everybody think of it this way: that lead team just we don't have those anymore, and now we have CMNs. Not that one became the other. It's just a cleaner thing. It's a cleaner way of looking at it that way, in my opinion. All right. Any other last comments or questions?
And I Paul asked about the dates moving forward. I don't know if did you have the dates on the slides?
No, I just said the month, but the intention is, the plan is to this time. I think we were talking the 4th. Today is the 4th, right? The 4th. What is it? Wednesday?
Yeah, I'm trying to pull up my calendar.
Okay,
here.
4th Wednesday of the month at 9:30 a.m. Panama time.
Yeah.
Whatever that means to you, wherever you're at. 9:30 a.m. Panama time.
May 27th would be the.
I will. So that's the intention. I will need to confirm this with the IBC office because there's a lot of online meetings going on now, and it's actually, in my opinion, it's wonderful. But they're also, we're already bumping into each other and stacking up on top of each other. It's like, 3 or 4 IBC wide meetings, and one day it's like, so we're going to coordinate that. But that's our intention. I'll get my dates in, our dates in today or this week, and then come back to all you guys with confirmation on it. Chris, it's good to see you, man. How are you?
Nice to see everybody. Really good, thanks.
Welcome.
I'm one of those guys that didn't confirm, but still showed up.
That's
half
fine.
an hour late.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's fine. And we may move to a registration required, just because there's a lot of, stupid things happening online these days, Zoom bombing. And so we may work with a registration thing.
That's what I'm doing today. This is a Zoom bomb. I'm just
Zoom
not.
bombs. All right, man. Zoom bombs.
It's an appropriate Zoom bomb. We appreciate it.
Hey,
Yeah,
Daryl,
Nice to see everybody.
I was going to comment that I think this is a good directional move, and I've seen it in other church planting movements. In Converge, lead teams were, a while back, and to change the structure so that the desire is to reach more people for Christ and start churches. And I love the fact that it's inclusive. That it's not just IBC, but they're pastors from all different church movements. And I like that, it isn't just for pastors of churches. You could be in any leadership role.
Yeah.
And I think the more diverse, I think that's a healthy move. And it's what's taking place in other movements as well. So this isn't, I just think it's a good idea. Good leadership.
Yeah. Thanks, Dan. I appreciate your, that's wisdom, and I appreciate that affirmation. Yeah. So exciting times. We want to see a lot of disciples made, reproduced, leaders developed, and churches planted all over the place. Get everybody involved. All kinds of churches, English-speaking IBC churches, whatever denominational church, if you want to, partner with us, play with us, and come on. And indigenous, language churches. There's nothing off limits. We can talk about all of it. We can be a part of it to some degree. Just to reiterate what Nate said, man, we make disciples, we plant churches, Christ-centered churches. It's a kingdom win. It's a kingdom win. I want to see more IBC churches born as well, but all those other kind of churches also. So, all right, Dave, glad you could make it. Join us as soon as you could, and hope your contractor appointment went well. Could I ask you, Dave, would you mind closing us in a word of prayer?
Yeah, I'd love to.
Thanks,
Good to
Dave.
see you guys. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, I thank you for waking us up this morning, for giving us life and breath. And we're grateful that we met grace and mercy this morning as well. And I pray your blessing on each one of us who are part of this meeting. I pray that you'd help us to keep our eyes on you in these days, to be faithful in shepherding the people that you've entrusted to us. We thank you for the things that have been talked about and that you've invited us to be a part of your kingdom advance. And I pray, God, that we would invest with great intentionality in the cause of your kingdom, to love you, to love others. And I just pray, God, that in these specific days that are historic in a lot of ways, that you would just increase our capacity to lead, to demonstrate compassion and empathy as well. Grateful for Daryl to lead us, and look forward, God, to what you are inviting us to. And I pray all this in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, brother. All right.
Hey,
It's good to see you all.
Daryl.
Yeah.
Paul pointed out that our new general secretary El Jefe is with us, and so
he's El Jefe Select. Well, I guess it's official.
I don't know if you want to say anything, Tim.
Yeah, go ahead, Tim.
Well, I'm not the general secretary yet. You can continue to blame Jimmy for everything until the end of October. But it's good to see you all, and yeah, excited. Like Daryl said, we debate whether we're asking people to be part of too many things, or just trying to be available. We hear the exhaustion cry coming from our leaders trying to get up to speed with the new challenges of the times, but at the same time, we've found value in being able to share the burdens with each other. So yeah, good to see you all. Let me know if I can serve you in any way. Love to do that.
Welcome. Glad you're here. Glad you joined us, Tim.
Thanks.
Well, oh man, Chris is just coming in now.
Chris Anderson's coming. We gotta fix it. We gotta figure out this time thing. Look, guys, I printed up the time zones this morning. I gotta learn this.
I was ready at 6:30 for those who missed it. I was like, man, Daryl didn't think about this time zone. I'm ready. I'm gonna do it 6:30. So
yeah. Well,
I'm ready for my nap now.
We were messing with Paul the whole time. Let's just keep changing the times just to mess with Paul. So that's good. We'll nail that down. Hey, Chris, if you've got time, since you just arrived, if you'll hang on to this call for a few minutes, I'd love to chat with you. Nate, you can hang around too if you'd like. But otherwise, everybody, God bless you. And we'll see.
All right. Take care, guys.
Good to see you, Chris. You'll get the whole seminar all by yourself. Awesome.
Good to see both Chris's. Good to see you guys, all of you. Bye-bye.
Great. Bye.
God bless you guys. Good to see you.
See you, Chris. All right. Here we go. Hey, Chris, how you doing, man?
Hey, good. How you guys doing?
All right, man. Good to see you. Yeah, we're just wrapping it up. there was a little bit of confusion on the time zone, time change, all that kind of stuff. Anyway, we're
Are
working
you
on it.
in Georgia? Are you in Georgia now, Chris, or Honduras?
I am. I am. I'm actually in Alabama right now.
Oh.
We're kind of right on the line where
Mhm.
we live. So, but yeah, we came up. We usually do our kind of yearly trip in February and March, and